All right, everybody, we're going to go ahead and get started. Griffin, are you in here with us?
Here.
Hey,
Excited to be here.
thank
Hello.
you so much for coming.
Of
All
course.
right,
Thanks for having me.
everybody. Our next speaker is a man of many titles. He is an Army Ranger veteran, an investor, author of Bring Your Own Pencil, host of the Veteran Ventures podcast, and VP of Corporate Development at High Ground. He has a really wide-spanning career, so we're really thankful to have him here with us today. Thank you again, Griffin. We really appreciate it. Go ahead and introduce yourself to everybody.
Awesome. No, thank you, Kylie. It's always great to talk to this group. I will go ahead and share. I just got a couple slides. I hate slideshows, so I'm keep this very minimal, but it might help illustrate some points here. So, like Kylie mentioned, I'm Griffin Brand. I spent about 8.5 years in the Army, got out a couple of years ago. So I was in your exact same spot not too long ago, trying to figure out what my next path was, what things look like post Army time. I'm currently based in Raleigh, North Carolina. I have worked in private equity for the last few years since getting out. I started in real estate private equity, doing commercial real estate investments, and currently I'm working in mergers and acquisitions, buying home services companies for a private equity firm. As Kyla mentioned, I'm not good at sitting still. So, since getting out of the Army, I wrote a children's book a couple of years ago. I started a podcast for transitioning service members called the Veteran Ventures Podcast, which tells the stories of impressive veterans who have transitioned out into really cool business ventures and other opportunities after the service. And most recently, I published Bring Your Own Pencil, the book you see on the screen, which is a leadership book about how to win at anything. Um, Thanks for posting that, Kylie. I'm going to drop a couple some other contact info stuff here in the chat. Uh, it looks like you already have my LinkedIn on there, but always happy to connect with folks on LinkedIn. Was has been a very powerful tool for me to make cool connections and learn about opportunities since leaving the Army. And so I'm always happy to help people there and be a resource however I can. So jumping into what I'd like to talk about today, again, it's always a pleasure to talk to this group because I feel like we're kindred spirits. I was in your seat not too long ago at all. But the agenda I'd like to talk about is really very simple. I'd like to ask one single question for each of you and then tell two quick stories. So the first is the story behind the title that you might be asking, what does that mean? Bring your own pencil. The second story is a chicken finger dream, and I'll tell you more about that in a second, and answer any questions at the end. Again, would love to connect with you all with that contact information in the chat here. So the question that I want to ask is, what standards do you take with you? Uh, Especially during major transition periods like leaving the military, it's so easy to start by setting goals to think about, I'm looking for X salary, I'm looking for X job title. And the military makes us especially good at that. We're really good at setting a goal and going after it, going out to achieve something audacious. And if someone gives you a ladder to climb, you're going to see how fast you can climb it. And all of that's great. I think that's a great attribute. It's something that the military really breeds excellence in that sort of way. But I'm willing to bet that the further you get down this transition road, you're going to keep finding that there's endless ladders that you can climb. You'll continually learn that there's infinitely more possibility than you ever could have realized. And personally, I've learned about worlds that I never even knew existed since leaving the military. And so when I say standards, I'm not talking about platitudes or one word values that are overly generic. While they can have a place too, I'm really talking about things that make you unique, things that separate you from others, and those are typically things that drive how you make decisions on a daily basis. So, for example, maybe there's a specific standard you hold that's like when I run into a wall or an obstacle, I find a way over it, around it, under it, or if none of those happen to work to get through that obstacle, I headbutt it until it falls down. Or maybe you have a standard that's like when I'm confronted with a choice between frugality and generosity, I default to generosity every time. Something along those lines. That's like there might be a bit of a trade-off there. It's not a generic like I'm a trustworthy person. While that's great, but it's something that actually helps you when you're confronted with a choice or when you have um, a daily fork in the road. It helps you decide which one you're going to take and what type of person you truly are. Um, so, the military doesn't define you, but the standards that you formed both before you were in the service and during your time in service certainly do define you. So I would just recommend and offer that you start by defining your standards before you jump into these super lofty goals as to what your next path looks like. Both have a place, of course. But if you control the inputs, really, if you control the standards that drive your daily actions, your daily decisions, then the outputs will take care of themselves. If you live by a standard, the achievements will take care of themselves. I'm about to talk about one of my personal heroes, Bill Walsh, who was a coach of the 49ers in the 80s. And one of his lines was, the score will take care of itself. If you focus on the standard on the front end, the score takes care of itself. And that's actually the title of the book that he co-authored before he passed away. Um, One of my good friends, Joe Byerly, who some people on this call may know, he's the founder of From the Green Notebook, the very helpful blog. He when he was a battalion commander, he had his unit buy into a phrase, and it was, "People like us do things like this." And I think that's such a powerful way of tapping into identity and into the standards that you personally uphold or that your unit upholds. So I'd ask you, what are you about? What makes you say people like us do things like this? Um, and so here's a great Bill Walsh quote: "Champions behave like champions before they are champions." I love this quote, and I'll get more into Bill Walsh here in a second. But what he's really saying is, greatness is built in quiet rooms when nobody's watching, when long before anything shows up on an external scoreboard. It's developed and back in those moments where no one sees it. And what I've learned and has continually become more evident to me is that there truly is a blueprint for success. If you follow this blueprint, given enough time and enough persistence, you will find tremendous success. And so that's really the premise behind the subtitle for this book that we recently published, called Bill Walsh's Playbook for Winning at Anything, because it really is his playbook for how he built a world-class NFL franchise team. And it's the same playbook that I've noticed has been used by tremendous military leaders and billionaire company founders, and everyone that you see that's achieved greatness has followed this exact same playbook. And so I'd like to just give you a small piece of the playbook that I've observed, by telling two stories that I think illustrate part of this quote unquote playbook for success. So the first one is the 49ers story. And so on the left side of your screen here, you see a guy named Jack Hacksaw Reynolds. And on the right side is a guy named Ronnie Lott. And unless you're a football fan or were alive and watching the sport in the 80s, you may not know who these guys are. But I'd love to share a quick story that kind of is the premise behind the title to the book, and a very powerful story that has stuck with me for a while now. So by the late 70s, the San Francisco 49ers were hands down the worst NFL franchise out there. They had auctioned off a lot of their valuable future draft picks, trying to get OJ Simpson, who I'm sure you've heard of, who at that time he was well past his prime. He was riddled with injuries, rarely played as a result. And mostly they just grabbed him because he was a spectacle. They're trying to draw more fans to games. And so they're down in the dumps, horrible team. And they bring in Bill Walsh, who's at this point 47 years old. He's been coaching for about 25 years, ever since he graduated college. And so he takes the head coaching job in 1979. And the first couple of years, 79, 80, are rough years. I mean, he's turning around a horrible franchise with zero prospects of getting better in the near future. He almost quit several times along, those first couple of years. He questions if he has what it takes, but he does ultimately hold it together, and Bill Walsh sticks through it. And they get to the 1981 season. And so as they're entering the 1981 season, Walsh knows that he has to instill a culture. He needs to instill a culture that is rooted in what he calls a standard of performance, really those standards that we're talking about. And it couldn't just start and end with him. Like it had to trickle down and permeate through all levels of the organization if he wanted them to be successful. And he knew he had to bring in the right people in order for that to happen. And so he went out and he started this process by getting a free agent veteran linebacker named Jack Hacksaw Reynolds, who was, considered past his prime. He'd been in the league for about a decade, but still was producing really good numbers previously for the Rams. And so that's him again, sitting on the left side, number 64. Looks like a hard-nosed player if you've seen him. So You might be wondering, how did he get the name Hacksaw? That's kind of an interesting name. Well, it came it came from when he was playing at University of Tennessee, and they lost a game that knocked them out of the SEC championship. And he was so mad about the outcome of the game and the fact that his season was over that he went to Kmart, bought a pack of hacksaw blades, and literally sawed his 53 Chevy completely in half by hand. And so that just shows you, I mean, we call him the right kind of crazy. The dude was just like a brooding, had an intensity about him, complete psychopath, if you will, but had the right kind of crazy to apply it um, to taking his frustration out. And so he was famous for not only this kind of brooding intensity, but he also was famous for his preparation. He applied that same maniacal drive towards the way he prepared for football games. And he did kind of wild things, like he would bring his own projector to practice, or the coaches would go home at night and he would still be there with it because he had his own projector. He would bring the stack of pens that were or stack of pencils and pens that were huge. He had like multiple notebooks. I mean, the dude would just bring everything. So he was a one-stop shop, and he even brought his own pencil sharpener so he could just roll through notes, roll through pencils. Um, and so that's this guy. He's Hacksaw Reynolds is a crazy dude, but he's like the standard of preparation. And so alongside him, also in 1981, the 49ers and Bill Walsh draft a guy named Ronnie Lott, the guy on the right side of the screen here. Now, Ronnie Lott was a phenomenal safety. He played at USC in California. Um, Highly valued draft pick. And so Ronnie Lott and Hacksaw come to one of their first preseason meetings, and Bill Walsh says, "All right, guys, take out a pencil, prepare to write down everything that I say, because it's important that we preserve these concepts and we go into the season really prepared." And so they get to this meeting. Hacksaw got his stack of pencils over there ready to roll. Ronnie Lott looks around, doesn't have a pencil, doesn't have paper, and leans over to Hacksaw and says, "Hey, Hacksaw, can I borrow a pencil from you?" And Hacksaw looks over at him and kind of growls and says, "Bring your own pencil." And Lott reflects back on that today fondly and says, "From that day on, I never forgot a pencil." And the premise here is, you know, he's it's a veteran player teaching a young rookie how to take ownership of his preparation. Lott credits a lot of his success. He goes on to become a Hall of Fame safety and an absolutely incredible career. And he credits Hacksaw with a lot of those early lessons that he learned that attributed to his later success. So um, just it's a little story that tells a big lesson. It's that kind of ownership mentality, that preparation became a hallmark of the 49ers organization throughout the 80s and beyond. They went on to become a dynasty as a team. I mean, they won 3 Super Bowls in just the decade of the 80s alone. They were known as one of the most well coached, well prepared teams in the history of football. Um, and Walsh had a standard of performance that he held everyone to, but he also brought in the kind of people that upheld that standard and kind of propagated, just like Hacksaw did. So I love the fact that that story isn't even really about Bill Walsh, but it says everything about the Walsh standards that changed everyone around him. So that's the bring your own pencil story. The second story I want to touch on here is a chicken finger dream, and I'm sure that this one, as I tell it, will become a little bit familiar for some of you. So in the early '90s, an LSU student presented a business plan to his class. Unfortunately, that plan won him the worst grade on the assignment, not because he had a bad pitch or he wasn't prepared or because the teacher didn't like him, but it was because his plan was only to sell chicken. And after all, he was in Louisiana. He they love Cajun food there. At the time, McDonald's was growing like crazy, and they were offering this super diverse menu with millions of options on it. And so, compared to that, his chicken finger only business plan was very different. And apparently, the professor didn't think it was a good idea. And so he was disappointed, but undeterred. He set out to execute on his plan after he graduated. And so he needed capital to get started. He didn't have enough money to open up the first location. And so he bought a cheap suit. He went to Office Depot, bought one of those one of those briefcases with the brass combination locks. And inside the briefcase, with the little cheap lock on there, he said he put a secret recipe. his secret chicken finger recipe. And what was really in there was the write up from his business school plan. They got him the worst grade in the class, but no one needed to know that. And so he went around town, talked to every lender, every banker he could find that would give him a conversation, and asked if they would help fund his chicken finger dream, help fund his chicken finger idea for a restaurant. Unfortunately, every single person he talked to, every single bank said, you need a decade of experience. Go work in another fast food restaurant. Go get some more time, finance experience under your belt. You need more experience. You can't do this. And how many times have we heard that leaving the army? You need more, or the military in general. How many people tell you you need more hard skills in order to do something? And the truth is, you can just make it happen. You don't need more hard skills, although those are very marketable. You can make things happen if you get creative. And so this guy got creative. He was turned down, and he decided, he was like, how can I make the most capital, the most money in the least amount of time? He started asking around, and he came down to two ideas. One was, I'm going to go be a boiler maker for an oil refinery because they work in these high pressure environments. It's pretty dangerous work, but they pay really well. I'm going to go do that for a little while. Then he finds out about commercial fishing up in Alaska. If anyone's seen The Deadliest Catch, they were filming while he was actually commercial fishing in Alaska, sleeping in a tent, working 20-hour days. And so he goes and works these jobs for a summer, makes as much money as he can as quickly as possible, absolutely kills himself, but finally gets to the point where he's got enough seed capital to start his first restaurant, get his chicken finger dream kicked off the ground. And alongside a couple investors that he took on and an SBA loan, a Small Business Administration loan, he finally opened the first location. It was right outside the north gates of LSU. And true to his word, true to that business school plan, he only had four items on the menu: chicken fingers, crinkle cut fries, Texas toast, and coleslaw. And so he lived behind the restaurant. He named the restaurant after his dog and committed to doing one thing better than anyone else. And that constraint, what we now will see, became his superpower. And so, Janelle, great guest in the chat. It is Raising Cane's and Todd Graves. Um, when Hurricane Katrina forced everyone to close, it devastated the Southeast. The Raising Cane's limited menu and simple business operations allowed them to be the first to open so they could serve the local communities. And that just really jumpstart. I think they only had 28 locations at the time. They grew exponentially from there as more people tried their chicken, loved their business model, and loved their food. Um, and so they've been on this crazy growth trajectory ever since. They're now, I mean, last year they passed 900 locations, continuing to grow incredibly fast. Their revenue per store is over 6.5 million, which is higher than any other major chain, second to only Chick-fil-A. And Todd Graves, crazy enough, still owns over 90% of the company. So the company is worth between 25 and 30 billion dollars, and he's 90% of that. So I'd say it's a pretty good outcome for him. Yeah, I like in the chat, we should have saved this one for just before lunch so you guys could have made more informed decisions. Um, but everyone had scoffed at his idea. Everyone, when his competitors offered a diverse menu with seasonal milkshakes, salads, wraps, and so much more, Todd Graves stuck to his decision. He stuck to his constraint that became a superpower. He was just going to do one thing and do it better than anyone else ever could. And so he made that constraint his competitive advantage. And he persevered until he made it through all these obstacles, through the hurricane, through supplier issues, through lack of capital. All of this, he persevered until he made it. And he didn't have the hard skills. Again, he didn't have the finance background or the restaurant experience, but he still persevered to the finish line. So what I'd leave you with is, when everyone else was trying to think outside the box, Todd Graves intentionally put himself inside of a box, and he's better for it. So I'm back to the original question as we kind of wrap up here. I know this is quick and fast, just like fast food. But what standards do you take with you? And as I implore you guys to ask yourself, what standards do I take with me? What am I leaving the military with that's going to define how I do business and how I operate going forward? What is my superpower that everyone else might view as a constraint? Because I guarantee if you think hard enough, there's probably quite a few that people see as a constraint or couldn't overcome themselves, that for you is actually a superpower that unlocks doors you didn't know existed. So I would, I would just encourage you to be the kind of person who attacks your next chapter following service, rooted in unshakable standards that set you apart and raise the performance of everyone that's around you. Just like Bill Walsh's standards raised the performance of Hacksaw Reynolds and Ronnie Lott through that Bring Your Own Pencil story. And again, keep asking, what is it that makes me say people like us do things like this? And never forget to bring your own pencil. I'm happy to be a resource in any way that I can. Always happy to connect, make connections that would be helpful for you through LinkedIn. I'd love to open it up for any questions that might be here. Thanks again for your time and for listening to these two little stories.
Yeah, yeah. If anybody has any questions, go ahead and raise your hand. I'm gonna start. I'm really hungry now, and I'm in England, and I can't get canes, and it's pretty sad. So thank you so much, Griffin. That was all awesome. What made you want to start doing this in the first place? Like, what brought the want on to write the book and present this to veterans, and where did that come from?
Yeah, so the quick story behind the book is when I was getting out of the army a few years ago, I was simultaneously reading "The Score Takes Care of Itself" by Bill Walsh and "Who Says Elephants Can't Dance" by Lou Gerstner, the story about IBM, the big IBM turnaround in the late '80s. And I noticed that there were these trends, but Bill Walsh and Lou Gerstner followed the exact same playbook, and it was around the same time. Bill Walsh just a little bit before. And so I was curious. And so I started really researching into it. I started researching other prominent business leaders and just started seeing that there truly is a blueprint for success. All of these folks are following the same process, doing the same things, same exact standards. They just look a little bit different for each industry. And so I started putting two and two together. My one of my college football teammates is a big name in the football space, and so he had made Bill Walsh his mentor essentially, not officially, but we like the phrase permissionless apprenticeship. And so he was a permissionless apprentice for Bill Walsh and had read everything Walsh had ever put out, watched a bunch of his videos, and so he and I started talking and decided that we wanted to collaborate my co-author's football knowledge with my military and business knowledge and mesh those all into one big soup that became this book. So this book is really a combination of military stories, football stories, and really sports stories broadly, and then business stories all into one. And don't get me wrong, none of them are my personal military stories. I tell the story of General McChrystal, who was very kind to write he wrote an endorsement for our cover of the book, and a couple other military stories you might recognize if you check out the book. But that's kind of the genesis of how this came about, is noticing trends and feeling like it was a worthwhile thing to put out there into the world. And I think it's very applicable to the transition from the military. At least it has been for me. We wrote a book that we would want to read. It's the book that I wish that had been out there. And so we just kind of made it happen. And I think that it touches on those standards of performance that are lead to success for anyone, especially during a transition of life.
Yeah, speaking of reading the book, you recently posted that it's in Barnes and Noble now, so congratulations. That's a
Thank you.
super big feat. Yeah, where
Thank
else
you.
can they get it if they want to read it?
Yeah, the three play. I mean, it's in certain Barnes and Nobles. It's probably not in every single one of them at this point. It takes a little while for their system,
Yeah.
but really, it's Amazon or our website, bringyourownpencil.com, are the two best places.
Okay, awesome. Going a little bit more into your podcast, Veterans Ventures. Tell us a little bit more about that, what it is, kind of what you talk about, maybe some patterns you see in these stories that you hear of the transitioning veterans.
Yeah, it's a great question. So we started the podcast. It's my co-host is one of the guys I served with when I was in the Army. We noticed that when we transitioned out, there were nothing against SFL Tap, but it just didn't give us what we were looking for, and that's why phenomenal groups like Seven Eagle exists. I didn't know that it was a thing. I had never heard of Seven Eagle at the time, and I wish that I had. But there's a bunch of tremendous resources out there that just people frankly don't know about, and SFL Tap doesn't necessarily funnel you that direction or isn't very insightful as you get out. And so we wanted to just make a one-stop shop so somebody could listen to this podcast, hear phenomenal stories from other veterans who have gotten out and done cool things, and really have a front row seat to those conversations. So that's kind of the genesis behind that. Um, I also noticed that, like I mentioned earlier, I had no idea what was possible after getting out of the army. I wish that I had known certain things were in the realm of possibility, and I'm still learning to this day what paths are out there that are outside of the typical kind of standard path. And so I just wanted to make that available for people through conversations. Some of the trends, I'll stay brief on these, but our episode number 54, I believe, I think it's our we did one season of the podcast, and then we're going to pick up season two here shortly. But our last episode from season one talks about some of the major trends, and a couple of them are, you know, and again, all of this is speaking personally from what I experienced through the transition. But a lot of people think that you are committing to your next position for a decade, that you are whatever your first choice is after the army. Like we all have a bunch of loyalty, which is phenomenal, but whatever you decide on is likely not going to be where you stay forever. For some of you, it might, and that's great. But don't feel like you're locking yourself into a decade-long contract after you get out, because there's a lot of pressure with that, and likely you're going to find something that scratches some itch, and you might want to pivot a different direction, or maybe you're still just learning about yourself. And so a lot of people think they need to commit for a decade, and that's puts way too much pressure on that transition. And then maybe one of the second ones I'll just briefly mention is, um, you know, it's easy to default to someone else's definition of success. There's like the standard path, like special operations into private equity, into investment banking and private equity. There's all these kind of cliche paths, if you will. And I would just encourage you, don't let those define you. Don't think that those are the only way, because there's so much more out there, and it's easy to go off of someone else's scorecard or someone else's perception to define what is a successful route for you. So hopefully that's helpful in some degree. There's again, we I think
Yeah.
we summarized it much more succinctly in our last episode. So if anyone's interested, they can check that one out.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think you did a really good job summarizing. I mean, you're proof that you can kind of go any route. You're doing like a little bit of everything. You have your hands in a lot of pots and stuff you're passionate about. So it really shows everyone. Also, that episode sounds like it'd be really good for anybody in here to listen to. So I dropped the LinkedIn of the podcast, and then it's on Spotify as well, I saw earlier. Is it on
Yeah, thank
Apple
you.
as well?
Yep. Yeah,
Okay,
Spotify and Apple. I can
perfect.
actually try and see if I can find let me see how quickly I can pull up the exact link to
Yeah, that'd
that
be
episode.
awesome. Nick, go ahead while he's pulling that up.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Can you... All right. Well, I don't want to be talking and then like, hey, we can't hear you. No, real quick, man, I appreciate you coming on here and talking to us and basically giving us a positive spin on life, right? Because I was honestly been doing like a lot of self-reflection and like what does my future look like and trying to figure out who I am as a person right now that I'm not told who I am as a person. But what's on the horizon for you, man? That's kind of what I was curious about is what's, you're talking to us on all those things. What's the next 10 years or 5 or 3 or 2 hours from now looking like for you?
I appreciate the 2 hour caveat there, because I'm a strong believer that, you know, whatever you achieve is probably going to be to the extent that in 10 years you don't recognize yourself. And so I think that there's power in setting long-term goals and vision casting and things, but I think anything longer than 3 years is like, you know, the Griffin 10 years from now is going to be drastically different than I can't even imagine him. So um, appreciate the question. I think for me, the the 25-meter target, if you will, is focusing on this book, and trying to figure out, how we can better spread the word, and um, get us to the right spots. We think it's, again, we wrote it for ourselves, but we've gotten a lot of really good feedback from people about how helpful it is and applicable to different situations. And again, I didn't come on here at all to pitch the book. I truly want to come on to help people find what they're passionate about, and help them in any way that I can, making connections or find a right path for you, because I felt like I was kind of in the cold when I was doing that myself. But um, yeah, we wrote the book with little mini stories similar to the two that I told you, because we think that you can dive into any part of the book and it kind of meets you where you are. It meets the situation that you find yourself in. And that's really our intention. It can be read sequentially from front to back, but it also can be kind of a reference manual. If you're going into a team meeting, you're going into a board meeting, going into briefing your platoon, before going on target, whatever it is, um, it can kind of meet that moment. And so appreciate your question. Right now, I'm kind of laser focused on the book because I'm really passionate about it, and we've gotten good feedback that it's helpful for people. So that's kind of the immediate target.
Awesome. Good to hear, man.
Griffin, talking about passion, is there anything you specifically did when you got out to try to kind of figure out your direction and your passion? Because, like Nick said, a lot of people in here are trying to figure out that same exact thing, and it's a little bit harder than it sounds. So, what did you kind of intentionally do to figure out your path?
I'm still figuring it out, obviously. With all the diverse things that I've done, I'm really just trying to run little experiments. I love the process of iteration because that's how you work towards getting closer to the right direction. So, um, when I got out, I was fortunate enough to do a skill bridge program. I worked for a real estate private equity firm, and I thought that that's what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. When I was investing in real estate while I was in the Army, active duty, and I thought that all the real estate investors that I saw make it big went into real estate private equity. They were doing private equity syndications, and so that's the route that I took. And I got into the job, learned a ton, enjoyed it for a little while, and after about 3 to 6 months, that skill bridge was just enough time to let me realize it's not what I want to do for the rest of my life. And so sometimes I think that learning what you don't want is just as powerful as learning what you do want. And that's kind of part of my the point I was trying to make about, just try things out. It may not be the thing you do for the rest of your life. It may not be your next decade, but the more you try things, the more you experiment, the more you learn what that process looks like. And to some degree, you might be taking lateral steps. You might even take some steps back, but ultimately, I think you can continue kind of tacking your way closer to the right azimuth, if you will. Again, not to use any cliche military terms, but um, so that's kind of the path that I took, learning what I didn't want and continually to work closer towards what I do think is what I'm meant to be doing and what I'm most passionate about.
Yeah. Diana, go ahead.
Hi, Griffin. Thank you for being here.
Hi, thank you, Diana.
Hey, I noticed that you have a BA in Spanish. Are you thinking of translating your book into Spanish?
That is a great question. I would love to do that if it makes sense. Honestly, I haven't gone down that route yet, but it sounds like something that would be really cool to do. My bachelor's is my Spanish is so rusty at this point. I would not be the one to take on that task, but that would be a great thing to do.
All right, good. Thank you.
Very good question, Diana.
I need to practice my Spanish, that's for sure.
She's kind of calling you out.
Yeah, that's good. I,
Um,
I welcome that.
Is there anything from the Army Rangers that you kind of like really helped you once you transitioned? Or on the opposite side, is there anything you really had to unlearn and kind of change your mindset on?
Um, yes and yes, very much so. Uh, so I guess I'll start with the first one. Something that I learned from, I mean, I learned it from the Ranger Regiment, but I also learned it from my service in all units. I mean, I had great experiences both in the 173rd Airborne when I was stationed in Europe, and then in the Ranger Regiment. Was that those who can find a way to yes, those who can headbutt a wall until it falls down if there's no other way around it, are the ones who succeed. And whether you're resource constrained in Europe or you're in a job where your boss is asking you to do a lot more with a lot less, it's those who can creatively find a way to make things happen. I love the phrase fire and forget. I don't have to tell people on here what a javelin is versus a tow, but one of the metaphors I draw in the book is between those two missile systems. So obviously, a tow missile is a wire guided system where the firer has to keep the crosshairs on the target all the way until impact. So you're literally guiding the missile versus a javelin, which is fire and forget. You fire the missile, and it's got a seeking mechanism that locks onto the target and makes impact, even if the firer goes and seeks cover after shooting it. So I draw that parallel in the book because the right people are fire and forget people, and if you can be someone who your boss can give a difficult assignment to, and you're going to figure it out regardless of what it takes within ethical reasons, of course, then the world would be any opportunity would be open to you. And I've just learned that more and more. I learned that throughout the Army. And I think that is maybe the most important thing that a lot of us take with us after the service is we are people who figure things out. Again, back to Joe Byerly's quote, people like us do things like this. We figure out hard problems. And that can sound cliche, but it truly is invaluable. What did I have to unlearn from the Army? That's another great question. I would say that it's in line with don't let someone else define your success. The Army and the military at large has a very rigid, I mean, you do this, you show up, you tie your boots, like you might get promoted a certain ways, like you can make it pretty far just following their system. The problem is when you leave the military, there's no set path. And in fact, there's way too many options out there. I was overwhelmed with like there's infinite things to choose from. How do I pick? And so I really had to unlearn my reliance on one particular path or my reliance on this is the way to, this person did this, so you must do it too and follow that path and you'll be successful like they were. Because the reality is outside of the military, you can jump from 1 to 1,000. You can jump from 1 to 1,000,000. Like you can make enormous strides just by the way you approach things differently. So I had to unlearn that there's not a linear sequence to your career after the military. Like, everyone loves the career trajectory in the military where it's like, by year X, I'm going to make this rank and go to this school. And that just doesn't exist. And it's actually very freeing once you can wrap your head around all that it offers.
Yeah, no, that's really good advice because right now to me that sounds super stressful, but I'm sure once I experience it a little bit more and get into it will be freeing, like you
And
said.
And I love to say, transition is a lifelong process. I'll be the first one to tell you, I feel like I'm still transitioning myself. Again, it's only been a few years, but I've talked to, again, on our podcast, I've talked to people who have been out for 40 years and they say, I'm still transitioning. It's a lifelong process. You're continually learning what it's like. And I think it does get less and less daunting as you take a step, as you go down a path, as you iterate, like I was saying, and learn what does excite you or what doesn't excite you. Either way, you're getting closer and closer to that right azimuth. And so just keep on taking the best next step and try and relieve the pressure as much as possible on making, the best 10-year or 20-year decision.
Yeah, that definitely makes it feel a little bit more doable. It's not something we have to race to try to finish the transition right now. We're just gonna keep doing it, keep getting better.
You're gonna crush it either way.
Catherine, go ahead.
So I'm just really curious. How does your day look like? Just how does your day look like being a VP of a corporate development?
That's another very insightful question. So I feel like my day is I don't have a standard day. I like to work in sprints, and it's just how my brain works. And so my day for the last several months while I've been finishing up the book and getting things out has looked very differently than it did, say, a year ago, or maybe than it will 6 months from now. But as specifically my M&A role working for a private equity firm, I am routinely on calls with company founders trying to, it's the impossible job of trying to convince someone to sell their baby, especially somebody who doesn't want to be contacted because we're in a very competitive space where there's a lot of interest for buying companies. And so to answer your question, typically I start the day off with several founder calls because these guys get started early. It's a field related job. And so talk to a couple of founders about their buying their business. Some of them I've been building relationships with for years now. And then I'll use part of the day to research additional companies that maybe I have to cold call or reach out to or find a way to triangulate a way to build a relationship or get an end to a conversation with them. I try and write every day if I can, hence part of the book and other things. I've got a bunch of future projects that I'm working on as well. So I try and make writing a part of my normal daily routine. And then every now, depending on the day, I got to report to the private equity firm that we work for, and I've got several different kind of corporate meetings, if you will, that are baked into that. But yeah, it's some mix of I'm an extroverted person, so it's some mix of talking to people, building relationships, and writing / processing my thoughts, because I think that writing is the best way to kind of make sense of what's going on in your head and turn it into something that's potentially useful, not only for yourself, but for somebody else.
Great question, Catherine. I just want to ask one more question, Griffin, just kind of end us off. If you could leave everybody here a piece of advice, one thing that you want them to take away from this, what would it be?
Don't stop. Just don't stop. And I know it may be cliche, but part of our book, and just because I love it so much, let's see if I can. Yep. So on this page, let me unblur this so you can actually see something for a second. On this one of the final pages of our book, we have a handwritten thing from Bill Walsh that says "Keep on going," and I just love that that phrase. Just keep going, don't stop, because so many people that have not achieved what they want stopped right before they're about to experience success. I think, if you're I'm a Christian, a religious person, not to bring religion anywhere into this, but like I love the story of Jericho. On the seventh day, they were walking around the wall and the wall fell down. But so many people stop on day six. So many people spend days and days, years and years circling, doing the same thing, working towards something, and they stop one day short. They stop just short of their goal. And I think the thing that separates greatness from people that you don't know anything about is that they just persevered until they made it. They pushed through all the obstacles. They pushed through until day seven, until the walls came down, and they finally achieved what they wanted.
Appreciate you. That was amazing last advice. Thank you so much, Griffin. We always love having you on. It was so great seeing you talk about the book today. So thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, everyone. It's always a pleasure to talk to this group. Again, please reach out on LinkedIn or otherwise. Happy to make connections. If you see someone in my audience or my connection list, always happy to help however I can. So thanks again. Best of luck to everyone.
Have a great evening.
Thank you. You too.
All right, everybody.